joined today by Judith Fremont-Barnes, the head of Milton Abbey School, a co-educational full boarding and day school in Dorset, about 2.5 hours west of London. Judith, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's the end of a quite a challenging term. Could you just give us a little introduction to Milton Abbey? Tell us a bit about Milton Abbey, please.
Absolutely. The first thing you need to do, if you haven't already got a picture in your mind when you hear the words Milton Abbey, is have a Google, because it will bring up for you all kinds of beautiful images of our school. We are regularly featured as one of the most beautiful schools in the country. And we are nestling in a valley in a capability brown landscaped context with a beautiful mansion as well as more modern buildings. And it's a beautiful place for a young person to grow up and to learn. But I always like to remind visitors to the school that the most interesting thing about the site is not actually the beauties of the place, but the real beauty is in the relationships between the staff and the students and their peers. And I think that's where the real beauty of this place lies.
Okay. I know that Milton Abbey, by a lot of senior school standards, is a very small school. What do you feel are the real advantages of being a very small school?
You are absolutely right. We are, by most senior school standards, tiny rather than small, because we're just over 220 pupils. And what that means is that we're the difference between a village and a town and a city. In this place, everybody is known by everybody else. They're known by name. They're known as a person rather than just a name on a list. And we think that's tremendously important. I think that when you're a small school, it's important for you to be outward facing. So we do have very good connections outside with the world, whether that's if you're working in our hospitality school, you'd be very well connected with the world of industry through our network of connections in the hospitality industry. Or it might be that you're studying a physics project, and as part of that, you're connected with one of our local universities. We know that as a small school, it's important for us to be outward facing, but we get all the benefits here of being a place where everybody can be known and noticed and nurtured. And we think those three are really important things to do and very much favoured by our small by choice context.
Yeah, no, that sounds wonderful. Now you talk about a lot, I think, at Milton Abbey about learning differently. It's something that, you know, comes up on all your marketing materials and things. What do you mean by learn differently? How does this actually, how's this carried out?
Well, I think from decades in the world of education, I've often been frustrated by the way that one size is supposed to fit all. And I don't know, Diana, if you've got any one size fits all garments in your wardrobe, but they tend just not to fit me. And what I would say is that we love at Milton Abbey the idea that we can acknowledge that each one of us has a different personality, a different brain, a different set of experiences prior to coming here. And what that means is that in effect, all of our students learn in a slightly different way. And all schools try to respect the uniqueness of their learners, but there's a reality around a large context and a focus on examination results as the primary output of a school, which can mean that that difference is squashed. And that you end up in a situation where everybody tends to end up being a bit the same. And I find it rather depressing sometimes when I visit a wonderful school and I meet the first young person and I think, gosh, you're fantastic. And then I meet the second one and they're rather similar. And then I meet the third one and I'm wondering whether the biology department is running cloning. The thing that we say here at Milton Abbey is we want our pupils to have some shared experiences and some common values that they're exposed to during the time here. But we really do want to respect their uniqueness as an individual human being and to make sure that they leave us more themselves than they possibly would be had they been anywhere else, rather than turning into something in terms of a product or a Milton Abbey student. And I can put my hand on my heart and say to you, there's no such thing as a Milton Abbey student. They're each one different, and we work hard here to celebrate and nurture those differences within this common framework that we share together.
Yeah, okay.
I can talk, I'm very happy to talk about the idea of learning differently. That's the sort of bit about, I suppose, about the difference of our learners. But learning differently, I think, has come about because we feel that too much focus is on children not being able to learn. And I interviewed a young man the other day who said, when I said to him, what's the most important thing a teacher should know about you? And he said that if I can't learn the way you're teaching me, that you should teach me differently. And I just thought, well, what a lovely thing to hear a young person understand about himself, that the way that we learn is the important thing, not the way I want to teach. And so our teachers are committed to the concept that when they're faced with a group of 14 or 15 children in an English class, for example, the important thing for them to do is to think about what that experience of learning is like for each one of those 15 children, and it will be different, and to tailor it. So teaching here is very exciting, but it's also very challenging, because within that group, we're looking at meeting a lot of very individual needs and making sure that each child can flourish. So to give some practical examples, one of my personal favourites is our wonderful deputy head academic, who was previously our head of maths. When he was teaching probability, rather than doing it out of a textbook, which is the way I remember doing it, I strongly remember for some reason the probability text of the maths textbook and the probability chapter being all about socks, and how many socks would you need to pull out of a bag, and what colour would they be? And I remember wanting to bang my head against the desk and say, I don't care. When Steve taught his lesson on probability, he did it by taking to the staircase of an outside building and flinging pieces of toast from the top of it to see whether they landed with the butter side up or down. And I remember thinking then, if someone had taught me probability that way, there's a chance I would have understood it and really cared about it. Likewise, I recall a geography lesson that I went to here, which was all about ecosystems. And I went along to the lesson, which was on my timetable, to observe a lesson on ecosystems, and went into the classroom, 5 minutes set up, talking about the vocabulary that was needed and the concepts that were going to be explored in the lesson. But then the whole class decamped to our wonderful woods. We're lucky to be surrounded by forest, and they experienced ecosystems for themselves by getting some mud under their fingernails. And I think that a lot of our learners really do benefit from learning physically and getting out from behind their desks. I don't believe that children were designed for a life behind desks. We have a mixture of very traditional lessons here, but also highly experiential learning that enables our learners to do things practically. We have a fantastic range of vocational courses here. So I, as a head, can walk around this site, and one moment I'm in a history A-level debate, with a fierce discussion going on about some aspect of Tudor history. And then I can walk into a classroom a couple of feet away, and there is a fierce debate going on about the production of the best possible chocolate eclair in our hospitality kitchen. And it's just great to have on the same site, growing up and learning together, young people who are wired differently from one another and who have different interests, different passions and different needs. A lot of our pupils have what we describe as very spiky profiles. So they might well have an area of real excellence, something that they adore, maybe comes easily to them, and something that they're really passionate about pursuing. But at the same time, they might have an area where it's really a struggle for them to access the curriculum in the same way as their peers. The great joy here is that we're able to accommodate that, and we don't spend all our time focusing on those bottom spikes on the profile, which can be very tempting for schools to do, and then overlook the top spikes, because the top spikes are usually where people find their joy and often their lifelong passions, or even their employment. So we make sure that we cater for those pupils who maybe, for example, are brilliant mathematicians but will struggle to pass GCSE English. Or the other way around. And it's great to be able to do that.
Okay, fantastic. Now, you alluded to the vocational side, and I know that, you offer all the traditional A-levels, but you also have this fantastic vocational offer. And I know that you were recently voted BTEC School of the Year. For those that don't know, and I think quite a lot of our sort of families, particularly maybe coming from overseas, won't be familiar with BTEC. Can you just give us a very quick explanation of the sort of BTEC vocational subject offer that you have?
Absolutely. So as you say, quite rightly, we have a mixture of qualifications here. We have some pupils who take A-levels, others who take BTECs, and some who combine the two. The BTECs are practically focused vocational qualifications that include industry experience, work experience, opportunities to learn collaboratively and to develop a very particular strength in an area of vocational study. And that could be anything from land-based studies. Here we offer countryside management, and so that will take our students off to places like the Holcombe Estate in Norfolk and off lambing to do their work experience, and learning a huge range of different skills that will be applicable for them, whether that's actually within the area of their chosen specialism, for example, in this case, countryside management, or whether it's actually around managing themselves and other people. So one of the things that we really like about the BTECs is that they include all those world-ready skills that organisations like the World Economic Forum are constantly telling us that we need to develop in our students around initiative, self-management, teamwork, the emotional intelligence that they're going to need to be successful in the wider world, rather than simply learning and analysing and regurgitating information. We have some of our subjects, as I say, are out practically in the countryside. Others of them will be, as I said, in the hospitality kitchen. We have, though, also a very significant range of creative subjects. So at Student Demand 2 years ago, we added Fashion BTEC, which is proving to be extremely popular. And just before Christmas, I had the pleasure of seeing the new lower sixth forms fashion sketchbook show. We have digital creative media. We have a whole range of different options for pupils who have a sense of what they might want to do in the future. But it's important to say that these qualifications are not limiting. If you decide that you want to take a different route, it's perfectly possible. Last year, for example, we had a young person who was taking a hospitality BTEC and got really interested in the legislative side of things and the business of HR law and so forth that she was exposed to during that study. And as a result of that, put in applications and received 5 offers from universities for law and criminology based on her BTEC in hospitality. So it's important to understand that we work with the family and the young person to keep as many doors open for as long as possible, because we all know that at this stage in life, ambitions and interests and pathways can change. But what you gain from the BTEC, I think, is a very rich experience of collaboration, self-management, the management and work with others, and also, crucially for many students, you experience real success for many learners for the first time in the classroom, and that builds confidence. And really, I often say to parents, you could wipe all the labels off our timetable, all the different subject labels, and just replace them with that one word, confidence, because what we're all about here is building up the confidence that young people need to take the world on when they leave.
Yeah, I'm sure that's so true.
And I think also another thing worth saying, sorry, Diana, is that BTECs are actually quite common currency. They're maybe not so well known about in the international independent sector. But last year, I think I'm right in saying that more than a quarter of all learners entering UK universities had at least one BTEC in their portfolio. And so it's important to be aware that the universities are very keen on these, just as employers are, and there is an equivalence so that all the doors stay open. And in practice, many learners achieve more UCAS points, more university entrance points from taking a BTEC than they ever would have done from taking an A-level. So it does open up new opportunities for our young people.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic. I mean, do you think more generally, we're always hearing about, the emphasis on the very traditional, very exam-based curriculum and the stress on young people to get all these A stars and things. Do you think that, more schools or more independent schools will embrace, a sort of different curriculum as you have? Or, I mean, I personally think it would be a fantastic thing to see, but do you ever think that's going to happen because of the pressure of the league tables?
I think it's a really interesting question, and I wonder whether it's one of those things when the dust settles on this pandemic, that this will actually have played a part in exactly what you're talking about. Because I don't suppose there are many employers in the last 8 months who have turned to anyone and asked them to sit down and write a 3-hour paper on something. One of the issues that employers and universities have been talking about now for some years is the mismatch between the way that we're preparing young people for the world and the skills that are required in the world. And I do sense all the way through from the changes that are happening at Common Entrance, actually within the prep schools, and the number of schools that are looking at providing something that is a better preparation in many ways, or augmenting the excellent work of the Common Entrance programme. All the way through to universities and employers who are now saying, well, actually, we're less interested in the grades than we are in the quality of thinking that goes on, for example, in a young person, and looking at the sorts of employers who are now standing away from a traditional paper-based application because they're not finding that it gives them the employees that they need who are ready for the 21st century. So yes, I really do think that we're at an interesting place. And of course, for Milton Abbey, this has always been running through us like a stick of rock, this desire to have people who are ready for the world. And very importantly here, we have leadership as a lesson, and our young people learn how to be leaders as well as how to serve. And we think those things are really important things so that they don't just go out into the world as what we would call paper people. As an employer, I'm sure you've had this experience too, Diana, of seeing someone who looks wonderful on paper and then you meet them and within seconds you know that they're not the kind of person that's going to add to your organisation or work well in your teams. And so as a school, we work very hard on those aspects of a young person's development that don't feature on the league table and don't feature on the exam certificates, but are going to make an enormous difference to what kind of dad they're going to be, what kind of a boss a young woman's going to be, what will it be like to live next door to them, you know, what kind of lives are they going to live. And we see that in very much working in partnership with our parents as our responsibility, much more than just what pieces of paper they have. Of course, it's really important that everyone optimizes their academic output and that they come out of school with their best possible grades they could have. But our experience is that where children feel comfortable and challenged, they do best, not when they're in a situation where they are really only being treated as a statistic. So what we're trying to do at Milton Abbey is create an environment which is high challenge, but moderate pressure. And I think that's really important. You know, you can be going through your working life, and unless you're a bomb disposal expert or a Formula One driver, you're probably not experiencing constant pressure of the kind that many of our young people are experiencing across the years of their senior school education. And then we wonder why they experience the mental health problems you were alluding to, or really just simply don't enjoy their education in the way as parents that we would want them to. And really, we're all about children being able not just to manage their school experience, but to really enjoy it and really flourish at school. And I think that given the right choice of school, that's a possibility for every child. No parent should ever have to settle for their child managing at school. Every child can find the right school in which they flourish with the help of advisors like you and the right school choice.
Yeah, well, let's hope, because as you say, it's absolutely crucial. I completely agree. Just a slightly more practical note. So in terms of, you know, if we have families, maybe not necessarily in the UK system already, in terms of how do you assess, obviously some of your children take the common entrance exams from UK prep schools, but for others, you don't insist on the common entrance. I'm assuming, you know, with your Learn Differently, that you would take a slightly more broad-minded approach to entrance to the school.
Absolutely. We feel really strongly that a lot of young people, and they're often the ones that turn into the most interesting adults, have their heads elsewhere when they're 10 and 11 and 12 and might be much more interested, for example, in constructing a fabulous Lego or doing an amazing piece of art or building a chicken coop than they are in taking a non-verbal practice battery. And so we don't actually require any common entrance benchmarks at all. In schools where children are taking common entrance, we expect that child to continue to have good effort and attitude throughout the time that they're at school. And we stay in close communication with their prep schools and their prep school headmasters and mistresses to understand their journey as they go through their final year in school. But what we're interested in is meeting the child. if a child is interested in coming to Milton Abbey, what we ask families to do is to be in contact with Claire Lowe, who's our wonderful head of admissions, who really will hold your hand through the journey. We understand this is not an easy thing to do. But we think that way too many schools have started to look at admissions almost as if they're a castle with a drawbridge. And will they let the drawbridge down to let your child in? We don't think that's how admission should be. We really do think that this is the start of a conversation about fit. And is it the right fit for your child? Can we give your child what your child needs? And is your child ready to come and give us what we need here at Milton Abbey for the most successful senior school education? So what happens is a conversation with the child. I like to interview the child separately so that mum and dad don't end up in that awkward, oh, don't forget to mention the trombone competition you won last year sort of thing, which makes the child completely clam up. So we like to do our admissions conversations with the child and then with the parents separately to get a really full picture of that young person. We also ask for a reference from their current school, which tells us a lot about how they're learning now, their strengths and their enthusiasms, and any challenges that they might be facing. And a significant number of our pupils have identified learning challenges, and where that's the case, we ask to see an educational psychologist report, for example, or any other relevant reports, so that again we can look at whether or not we can match needs. Because we're an inclusive school, but it's important to say that we're not non-selective. Because we can only admit children here who we think we can meet their needs and where we think they have got the best chance of success. And sometimes we say to a parent, actually, having gone through this process, we think we're not the best place for your child, or we can help you think about where might be. So we take a very broad approach, I think it's fair to say, to admissions. And what we're looking for in terms of children who are likely to succeed here are doers. So I think this would be a very hard school for a child who wanted to come and watch other people living life. We are small, as you said, and what that means is that in order to have the fantastic array of things going on, the choirs and the rugby teams and the wonderful art experiences and all the different things that we do, in order to have those things, it means that you end up getting involved in lots of things, sometimes things you would never have dreamt of being involved in a big school, and sometimes things where you might not ever have got chosen. But we know, again, back to that all-important word confidence, that the opportunity to be involved in all these different activities really does build young people's confidence. So we think that the people who will succeed here is the people who really wants to come and get involved, and a child who maybe is someone who would really rather just fade into the shadows and not get involved in anything at school, is going to find Milton Abbey quite hard, because we're quite full on. We do like our pupils to take a role, but I think an important thing to say is it doesn't matter what that role is, and you could just as easily be celebrated for being the person who has written a fantastic project about the trench coat, which last year one of our students did, a brilliant piece of writing for an EPQ about fashion, as somebody who is a great star on the rugby pitch. It doesn't matter what your interest is or your skill is, all of those things are respected here and they're all celebrated here. There's no sort of hierarchy among the students as to who matters most.
Yeah, fantastic. And I know that Milton Abbey is mainly a boarding school. And do you offer weekly boarding, or are you still full boarding?
No, we are one of those unusual schools that is still focusing on full boarding, and I'm very happy to explain a bit about how that works here. We feel really strongly that we are building a community, and our young people come together, they learn together, they work together, they live together for these periods of time, and there is an intensity and strength about the community because of the fullness of boarding. People aren't coming and going. You don't have to wonder whether someone's here at the weekend or not. They are, because we all are. We have a small local day community, and our day pupils are fully involved in the life of the school. but our boarders have that continuity of care and of learning. That means there's always a teacher around to ask for a word of support or encouragement. There's always someone around to watch and see how things are going for you. And we think that it's much healthier than I would say some boarding these days is so flexible that it's not really boarding as we would know it. And what can happen is that you end up with a small group of children who are pressing their noses against the window at the weekend when everyone else is going home. Whereas here we have a wide range of activities. And if anything, the weekend is busier than the week. So it's a really enjoyable time. A combination, because teenagers very much need this, of time to relax, but also time to pursue new activities and interests with your friends.
Mm. And you haven't seen any drop off in interest. You know, one always hears about, you know, more parents now wanting their children home at weekends, but you haven't seen or had a problem with that, with fewer parents wanting full boarding.
No, not at all. And I think that partly this is about our relationship with our parents. We have a history of having really close relationships with our parents, really good engagement. And I would say that we have a very much an open policy. If you want to come and see your child during the week, if you want to come and watch a match or see any activity that they're involved in, come and attend chapel on a Sunday, you're very welcome to do all of those things. We just ask that around that visit, your child stays with us as a boarder, and that seems to work very well for everybody. And I think that a lot of times these days, family life is very busy. And it's really nice for families to know that because of the way the children work here, that when they come home for a long weekend or when they come home for a half term, they're not coming home with bushels of work to do. They're coming home to enjoy time with their family. And we find that our families really enjoy that balance and appreciate being able if they are close enough, to come and see their children and take part in those activities. But also, even before the pandemic, we were working on ways of bringing our families closer through technology. So, for example, before the pandemic, we had already started trialing live reports, because I think sometimes school reports can be just rather dated documents by the time you get them, because of all the processes they go through. And now we have a live reporting system where the child, the parent and the tutor sit together and talk about the child's progress. And I think our families really enjoy that. Just as we've had our end of term, parents came along to our end of term assembly and were able to have a window into what was going on. And our boarding house masters and mistresses do an excellent job of keeping in touch with families on an individual basis so that no one ever needs to feel isolated or remote from their child's experience.
I mean, I think certainly for a lot of our families from overseas, you know, proper full boarding schools that we know do this properly, it's a huge advantage, as you say. Otherwise, you're the ones left with a nose to the glass on a Saturday afternoon. So
Absolutely.
it's great to hear. Thank you so much.
I should also say that we have a program where we have INIAT, which is an EXIAT, the weekend away can be spent here at school. And we're lucky to be surrounded by some really gorgeous countryside and some great towns. And our international families really enjoy that their children have maybe spent the day in Bath, getting to know that lovely city, or taken a trip to Stonehenge, and not just been here in the term time, but actually had some holiday time to enjoy that experience together and meet some other people from around the school that they may not have known so well.
Brilliant. All right. Well, Judith, thank you so much for talking to us. It is fascinating and, you know, wonderful to hear about a small school that has got such a distinctive and wonderful offer. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure. And thanks for all that you do in advising families. I know it's much appreciated.
All right. Thanks so much.